Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Lord, and thank you so much for joining us for this post-cabinet briefing coming to you from Ilara Court. We will be addressed this afternoon by the Acting Prime Minister and Minister of Transport, Works and Water Resources, the Honourable Santia Bradshaw, as well as the Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, the Honourable Kirk Humphrey. And they are joined by the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources, Dr. the Honourable Ramel Springer, and the Chief Technical Officer in that ministry, Mr. Philip Tudor. And Minister Humphrey will begin.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thanks to the media for coming. Thank you, Prime Minister, for allowing me to lead this off. I think, as you all know, we have made a determination that we will have these post-cabinet briefings as regularly as possible to keep the people of Barbados updated about the things that we have decided and the policy direction in which the country will be going. Today, I just want to speak very briefly in relation to issues pertaining to homelessness and the decision that was made at the Cabinet today. Now, you would have heard over several conversations that myself, my permanent secretary would have said that there's a need for us to find a way to properly address homelessness. And we would have already stated that we are working on a homeless policy. We're working on an action plan as well. But the reality is that there's a growing number of persons manifested in the streets of Bridgetown particularly. And since we would have made the determination by the Treasury, then there was some concern about the persons in town. And of course, every now and then there are occurrences that catch the attention of the media that drive further conversation. The reality is that we have made a determination that we must address homelessness. In Barbados currently there are really 3 facilities that cater to homeless people. It is the Clyde Gollop Shelter for Homeless Men, and that caters now to 34 men. It's a 24-hour shelter. Men come and go as they please, but they're there to provide for themselves. They have to bring their own food and so on and so forth. We also have the Salvation Army Male Hostel and Feeding Center as well. And while that allows catering for 21 persons, I think there's a small fee as well. And then, of course, there's the Barbados Alliance to End Homelessness, which offers a much wider variety of services and caters to the various needs of persons who would be homeless and has the capacity to hold 90 persons. One of the challenges that we had is that the Alliance to End Homelessness can only have a person during the day because of cost constraints. So they operate, during the night for cost constraints. They operate from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., which means that during the course of the day, persons who are homeless really have no facility. The other thing is that during the night time, it's probably not the best time for interventions, for counseling, medical interventions, and so on and so forth. These things are better delivered in the day. So for us to be able to adequately address the challenges facing homelessness and the homeless, we needed to have access to a homeless shelter. If you consider that in relation to what the Prime Minister has recently expressed and what I've expressed is the functioning and DNA of this government, which is that we will work with the third sector. We're going to work with the NGO community to be able to deliver this. You'd have seen it very recently in relation to our announcement with BARP, that we're going to be working with BARP to build facilities. It's not the first time we've been making that expression consistently. We just believe that the devolution of some of this responsibility to the NGO sector is the best way to deliver goods and services to the people who need them the most. So in this regard, we're going to be having a relationship with the Barbados Alliance to End Homelessness, and they have a capacity for 90 persons, which means that during the day, there are 90 available spots. And we will be partnering with them to be able to deliver this 24-hour homeless shelter. We believe that we will see immediately a reduction in terms of the persons in town if they agree. Because I want to make it very clear, this is not a case where we're going to be going and dragging men and women against their will into some institution, but if they agree. And at that facility, they will have access, of course, to the beds, but more importantly, we think, we will have access to nurses, doctors, counseling services, 3 meals a day, and so on and so forth. I think that when we do this, we are then able to treat homelessness in a much more holistic manner. We take the persons off the street, yes, but we are addressing the issues pertaining to their state of mind, which for a large part of the Barbadian homeless, it is in relation to mental illness and so on and so forth. So if we're going to have the capacity to address that, then we need to address it in all its different iterations. And this allows us to be able to do that. Of course, in partnering with the homeless shelter, I think as well that the government will save a significant amount of money. If we were to try to do this on our own easily, to cater to the number of persons that we think we can cater, it would easily cost the government several hundreds of thousands of dollars, easily, considering the way that things go. We also feel that we have to build on the expertise where the expertise exists. And there is no doubt that there is tremendous expertise in the Barbados Alliance to End Homelessness. So we will be partnering with them. But the operation doesn't end there. We've already had conversations with other persons in this space, persons who are offering feeding, for example, and we've said to them, we want to support you too. So to give them a little bit more financial wherewithal to go further, to be able to treat and to feed other people as well. So we believe that this will begin in the first day of October until the end of the financial year. The Alliance to End Homelessness already receives a subvention from the government to allow them to operate, but that subvention caters to the night operation. The additional monies that we're adding will cater to the day operation and will therefore allow us to treat to the issue in a much more holistic and a way that allows us to treat to the issue at the core. So, we would have said we were going to deal with it, and I believe this is the beginning of how we're going to deal with it. Of course, there are a number of other interventions in relation to the policy we're developing, the action plan, and so on, the matters that we are going to discuss in relation, probably at another meeting, in relation to welfare, and how we're changing that to be able to properly deliver homes to persons who need homes. But it's going to be a very complex response. So I just wanted to give the public the assurance that the government is working to make sure that we treat to homelessness in the way that we said that we would. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Minister. Thank you to members of the media and to those who are also joining me, Dr. Springer and Mr. Chuda, the Chief Technical Officer in the Ministry of Public Works. At the outset, let me just re-emphasize what Minister Humphrey has said, that this particular initiative is really the start of the works that have to be done in relation to homelessness. It is a very multidimensional approach that has to be taken. Nothing that we do in relation to this alone is going to solve the problems overnight of homelessness, and I think the Cabinet today also emphasized the fact that there are persons who become homeless for different reasons. There are a number of people who have mental health issues. There are also persons who are evicted from their homes, and therefore, while we are catering to the issue in relation to persons not having anywhere to go during the day, we also recognize that there's still other programs that we have to put in place to be able to cater to the needs of the persons who become homeless as a result of various circumstances. So I thank the Minister certainly for responding as swiftly as he did to be able to get this to Cabinet, and for the Cabinet certainly for agreeing to take this particular initiative and to allow the Barbados Association to End Homelessness for being able to, again, be on the forefront of assisting the Barbados government in this particular initiative. Now, I wanted as well this afternoon, let me just state, Prime Minister Motley, we ended Cabinet a few minutes ago. She is actually en route to Cuba for the G77 and China Summit of Heads of State and Government. Also then on to New York to attend the 78th session of the UN General Assembly in New York, and will be making her way back to Barbados around the 26th of this month. In the interim, obviously I will act as Prime Minister, and as I said, we wanted to just update the country as it relates to some of the other decisions. One of the things that came out of Cabinet today as well was the ratification of a paper that we brought just last week in relation to Borden's Bridge. I know many persons in the St. Andrew district, and in particular my parliamentary secretary, have been asking for quite some time about the Borden's Bridge. We had previously brought it to Cabinet, and at the time we were looking at a precast structure to be able to start the works on the bridge. There were some variations that had to be made to the design. I think everybody is well aware that the Scotland district is not a straightforward district to work in. As a result, we had made some variations. There were some increases in the cost, about 50,000 extra, to be able to make the necessary accommodations. And having had all of the designs put in place, speaking with the contractors, we are now at that stage where we've given approval for the commencement of the works for the Borden's Bridge in the parish of St. Andrew. Members of the media and the public would recall that I think it was last year, we would have had to close the area and created a temporary bridge. We also then reopened the bridge after doing some works in the area to ensure that our buses could traverse the community, because we recognize obviously that the St. Andrew district has several bridges that connect from one area to the next, and one of the major challenges that the people of the parish were experiencing and people traversing through the parish was having to take longer distances to get to and from their homes or even to and from their businesses. And we wanted a temporary solution at the time, while at the same time working on finding a more permanent solution. And I just want to reiterate that while the issue of bridges, I think, is in the forefront of people's minds, it is also on the forefront of the government's minds as well. And I can tell you that, you know, we've been working not just on Bordens, we have been working on the Pike Corner Bridge. We visited Pike Corner just last week with the entire team. My permanent secretary is new to the ministry, so we wanted to give him as well a better understanding of the challenges there. That bridge is about 60% complete. It has taken a little while to come to completion, but we are awaiting some equipment and some parts through the Ministry of Housing, whose steel benders have been working very closely with us to be able to assist the ministry to complete those works. Those who visit Pike Corner will see that the clearing of the area has started. It was overgrown with bush for some time, but we actually have started to accelerate the process of getting that particular site back in motion, and I'm hopeful that the Ministry of Housing should be in a position to get the equipment up and running very shortly to allow us to start back the Pike Corner area. There are also some other areas that have, certainly from the time I became minister, have been on the tips of everyone's tongues. The Fruitful Hill area, that particular bridge has been of concern. We've been able to start back the Fruitful Hill area. We were able to deploy a number of Gabion workers onto the site. The designs are ongoing in terms of the layouts of the lands to ensure that the area is safe. And those teams have started back on the site. Obviously, there were some challenges we had at all of the locations in relation to Gabions. Gabions were not easily accessible, particularly during the COVID period. And even after COVID, we still had challenges in terms of getting a lot of the materials into the country. The truth is, and Mr. Chuda can back me on this, we've had to sometimes barter with the Chinese, the Complant team, where we have loaned them our Gabions because they are bringing Gabions into the country as well, and that has taken a lot of time for them to also get their supplies into the country. We also do a trade with the soil conservation from time to time, just to make sure that we can continue to progress the works program of this government in relation to the Gabion building. We have trained up a number of persons through the Ash Worker program who would have been able to learn to do Gabion building. Many of those persons have now completed their certification at the Barbados Vocational Training Board. In speaking to the principal there, it is our hope that we can engage some of those persons in a meaningful program with the Complant team in the Scotland district in due course to be able to help us to ramp up the areas of Fruitful Hill, Trial Path, Coconut Grove. So you've seen a number of stalled works in some areas, but in many cases it's also been a case of capacity to get the human resources to be able to build out the teams in order to get those particular sites going again. We've cleared the Trial Path area. That is also ongoing. We want to be in a position to complete the works that are there. And just to say that many of the bridges that are of deep concern to the country are actually within the Complant program. People seem to forget, and perhaps it is deliberate that they forget, that there was a period of time where there was no work being done on any of the bridges across the country. Mr. Chuda has been here longer than I have, and he's well aware of what I would consider the neglect of various communities, where we have the large number of bridges in the rural areas. And we were able to come to office and to engage in a loan agreement with the People's Republic of China to obtain financing of $230 million in order to be able to not just help with the rebuilding of our bridges, but also several roads within the Scotland district. Now, I don't think sometimes people appreciate that having signed the loan agreement, there are still several other things that have to be done in order to start that works program. And we meet on a regular basis with the compliant team, with the contractors who work for the supervisory consultants who work for the ministry every Monday, actually, along with Mr. Chuda and the team at the ministry, to work through with the compliant team the geological studies that have to be done in the respective areas to ensure that we have the designs done on the various projects. While the Chinese will design what is necessary for the various areas, the team of supervisory consultants and the ministry staff have to also weigh in on that process. In that process, it means that we have to wait on other subcontractors because a number of the persons who are actually working with the compliant team are Barbadian contractors. They're Barbadian consultants, they're Barbadian surveyors, they're Barbadian persons who are working constantly to assist with this particular project. So I know that there is an anxiety that people have in terms of, you know, the frustration of not having the works completed as quickly as we would like. But I think that there needs to be an appreciation of the time that it takes to make sure that the designs are accurate. The Scotland district has a number of different soils. As a consequence, it is often very difficult to just, you know, as we would do in the city areas, just simply go and start construction of a road or even of a bridge. There are a number of tests that have to be done. And if you take the King Street area, while the investigative tests had been done initially, again, we encountered some slippage there, which led to all of the consultants coming back together in terms, as well as soil conservation, to be able to revisit and to do additional testing, because the persons in that area, the residents will tell you that this is not the first time that we've had issues in the King Street area, even when Barbadians have been engaged to be able to assist on and to build out the roads. And therefore, there are some challenges as it relates to the drainage, and Mr. Trudeau can speak to it more, but there are obviously some challenges in that area. And so we pause on King Street to investigate even further whether to continue along the way, I think it is past the shop, whether we would continue with the works, whether we needed to revisit the designs, and to look at whether there was more compaction that was needed in terms of that specific area. I think those site visits have actually been completed, and within the next 2 to 3 weeks, I think the intention is that they will be able to start back work on the King Street site. So we do understand the frustration, but equally we are not going to do anything from the technical end that is going to endanger the lives of persons either. The rain has not helped us, and let me just make that clear. There are times when, even with the best intentions, we've started the projects, and then there's been slippage of the lands even before we can complete certain stages of the works as well. In the White Hill area, and I don't hear the press talking too much about this, but there was a period where White Hill was on the tips of everyone's tongue in relation to the abandonment of the people of the White Hill area. This administration has relocated residents. It has also made it clear that we were committed to not just moving the persons from the area, but also for the persons who could remain in the White Hill area, being able to improve road access and vehicular access for those persons. So yes, there are challenges. Sometimes we have the complaints of the garbage trucks having difficulty going in. And that is why we are working towards ensuring that there is proper road access for the residents. There's some who have businesses as well up there. We want them to be in a position to be able to have persons access their homes, their businesses as well, so that they can, sell their products too. So that work is ongoing, and substantial work has taken place in the White Hill area. If you have seen it before and you go in now, it is an area that has been completely transformed. We've had to relocate persons because some persons were in the path of the new design that was done in the White Hill district. And as a consequence, that takes time, because while we make the decisions that we have to relocate someone, we can't just put them out the next day. We have to take certain steps in relation to the Ministry of Housing and certainly Minister Humphrey's ministry as well, to be able to find ways to support that transition from where they resided into another area as well. In some cases, the persons are coming back. In some cases, the persons are permanently relocated. But these are some of the things that I don't think are the sexy topics that are discussed in the public domain, but these are the realities of what we are doing in relation to the Scotland District project on a regular basis. And I appreciate that we have to get the roads fixed. We're working with the Complant team very closely in terms of ensuring that the bridge work that is being done, that we're also ensuring that the roads leading to those bridges are also done at the same time. Because we're mindful it doesn't make sense just doing the bridges and then the roads leading to it are not done. And if you take try a path, a road is actually on the Complant program. But the try a path bridge was actually started under the ministry and stalled only because of the Gabion works that were done. So where we have situations like that, we've been engaging with Complant to ensure that we complete what we are supposed to do so that we can actually hand over to them in a seamless manner so they can commence works as well. I think the other bridge that I'm sure is of concern as well in the other area is the Melvin Hill Bridge. That was the most recent one that was brought to our attention certainly in the public domain. We've been well aware that we've had a number of challenges with the bridges. That one, I think it was about 20 meters length of the existing retaining rubble stone. The wall actually collapsed about 2 weeks ago. The team from Complant, because this is in the Complant program as well, the team would have visited with the supervisory consultants and the engineers that are working on the project. They've looked at different solutions. Obviously, some of them may require the use of the Gabion baskets. We've looked at the construction of a reinforced concrete retaining wall. They've looked at different modular mass concrete Lego block wall work, which again, Mr. Tudor can speak to more from a technical perspective. But there are different options that are being explored in relation to that particular bridge. When we close off a part of the road, it is not to say that there is an absence of thought given to safety. The technical team obviously goes in and looks at whether or not the road is still passable, if the particular part of that structure is unsafe, and therefore if vehicular access can still pass over it. But just to say that while we allow limited access, we are working assiduously to bring up a number of these bridges that have fallen into disrepair in a rather fast-paced manner in the last few weeks and months, to ensure that they are not in the second phase of the Complant program, but rather that they are prioritized within the first phase of this particular program. And that type of shifting is something that continuously has to happen, because while we know everything needs to be done and we've prioritized with all the best intentions what we feel to be the priorities, the weather is not cooperating with us most of the time, and the heavy rains are causing an acceleration of the work that is actually required on some of the bridges and even some of the roads. And so I think Barbadians need to just appreciate as well that we're working against circumstances in some cases beyond our control. I will not sit here and say that some of the things are not within our control, and I'm trying to address those issues in relation to internal issues of management of the projects and how we deal with the supervision of the various sites. But in many cases where we have started projects, the rain has been a major factor, or even the access to supplies have also compromised our ability to keep the projects mobilized and to keep them going as well. So I wanted to just simply update on where we are on these major projects. Obviously, there are others. I think Mr. Trudeau, again, can speak to others. Just to say also that Dr. Springer, while the representative for St. Andrew has been very integral in the Scotland District, he's not only overseeing St. Andrew, but he has been on the ground almost every day in relation to ensuring that these bridges and the roads that are identified, that we're working very closely with the various teams. His knowledge of the issues of access, I think, has also been very beneficial to this exercise, because we needed to have local knowledge of the districts. If we touch one bridge, what is going to be the impact in relation to communities? And that is something that has added value in our approach to dealing with the rehabilitation that is necessary in the Scotland district. So I'm going to just ask Mr. Tudor, perhaps, if you want to just elaborate on any areas, just to do so.
Yes, thank you, Prime Minister. Regarding the Complant program, as Prime Minister indicated, is a $230 million program for roads. I think there are about 70 roads in the Scotland district to be rehabilitated. This is a program that is supposed to last 3 years, and during that time we are looking to repair most of the land, well, not all of the landslip areas, as well as rebuild about 8 bridges in St. Joseph and St. Andrew. You would appreciate that most of these bridges were built in the 1930s, 40s, and they were not designed or built to carry the heavy loads that they're currently experiencing. So what we are doing is rebuilding most of these bridges. We are making them climate resilient. In other words, the bridges have to be bigger because we're getting more intense rainfall due to greater hurricane forces and stuff like that. So we're making them more resilient going forward than they currently are as it now stands. If you permit me, we have about 15 roads in this first phase to do. The Prime Minister alluded to the White Hill Road, which is currently being undertaken. We completed work at Shorey Village. That was the first road under the Complant program that was to be done. We're going to work on Ernie-Bourne Highway. IDB would have done a section of Ernie-Bourne Highway, but we're continuing from Barclays Park up to Cattle Wash, and also from the school, Alliance School, right, Alliance School to St. Andrew's Parish Church. Moores Bottom, Hillaby, Bloomsbury. Now Bloomsbury, we're kind of concerned with Bloomsbury because that is failing at an accelerated rate. So we've asked Complant to go in and do the designs for Bloomsbury so that we can start Bloomsbury as soon as possible. I don't know if you're familiar with these areas. Highway 3 from Bonwell Junction to Garrix Hill. Highway Z from Andromeda. Now Andromeda to Garrix Hill is another one. We're doing Sugar Hill, Trail Path, King Street, St. Simon's. So all of these are roads that are priority number 1 on our list to be done. And the Complant engineers have started the preparatory work as far as the surveying, the land surveying, as well as the design work has also commenced. So you will see over next couple of months, most of these roads being undertaken. Right?
Okay. I'm going to ask Dr. Springer to just also weigh in. As I said, he has dealt with this very intimately over the course of the last few months. Dr. Springer.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Interestingly enough, I spent the entire morning in the field visiting some of the bridges that were just mentioned. The reality is that a number of bridges in the Scotland district are in a state of disrepair, but the reality also is that we cannot, even if we try to, fix all of the bridges at the same time. So we would have identified 2 bridges that were in an advanced state, which are the Thompson Bridge and the Bordens Bridge. Now the Thompson Bridge it's over 2 years that bridge was closed. Were it up to me, I would have wanted the bridge to remain open, but we have to listen to the advice of our technical staff. And it was the advice of the CTO and the engineers who went down there and assessed the bridge that the bridge was no longer safe for vehicular traffic. The abutment walls on the bridge had failed, and that meant that the bridge posed a real hazard for vehicles of any weight crossing over that bridge. So we had to close that bridge. And that bridge was a priority from the time we came to from the time I came to this ministry. we would have spent many a Monday morning discussing the best possible design for a bridge like that. That is one of the biggest bridges in St. Andrew, and it takes a tremendous amount of water during the rainy season. And the CTO alluded to the fact that we now have to build bridges that are resilient to climate change. Maybe it's something that we do not discuss a lot, but I think that there's no coincidence that a number of our bridges are now failing. They are failing because of a combination of things. Age, because many were built, as he said, back in the 40s and the 50s. Because of vehicular loading, they weren't built or weren't designed to take the heavy traffic, the trucks, the sand trucks, the 10-wheelers and the heavy buses that we now have on our roads. They weren't designed for that type of vehicular loading. Also, and then there's climate change, where we are seeing more intense rainfall, which has an impact on bridges, on the structure. Intense rainfall would increase scarring of the bridges, of the bridge foundation, because you have a number of bridges that are directly impacted by flowing water. And in the Scotland district, there's a lot of sandy soil, and that sand is carried in the water during flooding, and that is what that abrasive nature of that water and that sand combined is what destroys the foundations of the bridges. So a number of the bridges are failing as a direct result of that. So you have climate change, you have age, and you have increased vehicular traffic on those bridges. And so we are seeing many of them failing at one time, but we cannot fix all at the same time, or I'm sure that St. Andrew will be, residents in St. Andrew will be marooned, because there are not that many access points into certain parts of St. Andrew. The Bordens Bridge, which the Prime Minister would have alluded to, that bridge would have failed last year, April 14th, I believe it was. And I certainly worked very hard, and the ministry worked hard to get a temporary structure in place so that persons initially who were driving in and out could get into their homes without having to travel around Highway 2 and around to Faraday Hill. That first bridge failed after heavy rainfall around December 17th of the same year, and we rebuilt that bridge. This time we rebuilt it even stronger so that bridge could take the buses, because we were concerned of the school children and the residents in the area too, having to travel so far during the rerouting of the bus service. So we rebuilt that bridge a bit stronger, well, the bypass road, I should really call it, a bit stronger so it could accommodate buses. So this year we were able to see buses travel over the bypass road, and that gave us a little bit of wiggle room to work on the Bordens Bridge. But the good news is that the monies to complete that bridge were approved. We are going to go in with a totally prefabricated structure, as opposed to having to cast in situ, which would take a longer time. We're going to have the structure, including the footing or the foundation of the bridge. We're going to have that prefabricated and brought into place and installed right there on location. And we're going to have a precast culvert, because it's such a small span, we can actually have a precast structure placed in that bridge. So that would speed up the time that it's going to take for that bridge to be completed and reopened. So we are employing new technologies in an effort to fast track as much as possible the rehabilitation of the bridges in the St. Andrew area. Bridges are not easy to build, and the Prime Minister said it. Building in the Scotland district is not easy. We are faced with challenges that do not exist in any other part of Barbados, and then often times we have to work in an environment that is waterlogged for half of the year. Right now we cannot work on the Thompson Bridge, for example, because the area is waterlogged. There's a river, a stream, or a creek, whatever you choose to call it, constantly flowing through that area right now as we speak. And it's difficult to work in that environment. And then there's always the possibility, seeing that we're in the hurricane season, that a system can form off the Atlantic, and within 4 or 5 days, that system is here pouring down inches of rain on the island. And that also would impact work within the Scotland district. So we are faced with these challenges, but we're still moving ahead. this time that we have, which some may call it as downtime as it relates to major construction, we are using this opportunity to do some designing. We are designing a number of roads. I think we're probably close to 30 roads that are either in an advanced stage of designing, or they're being actually assessed by the consultants and are being worked on as we speak. So at least I would argue about 30. We're 10 initially that we started with, and we've probably added another 20 or so over the past couple of weeks. But we're working hard to ensure that access to persons in the Scotland area is as easy as possible. But just want to tell Barbados and tell persons in the St. Andrew area that if we can do it faster, we would have. But we are doing everything that we can to get those bridges and those roads repaired. But it's going to take time. It's going to take time, and it's going to take serious management and sequencing of the work to ensure that as little disruption to persons entering in and out of the St. Andrew and Scotland district, as little disruption as possible is experienced by those persons in that area. And I think I can stop there for now.
Sorry.
I think the timing of today's press briefing couldn't be better in terms of there are some who are out there trying to stir up a panic amongst people in relation to the safety of the bridges. And I think it is important that the country is made aware that the Cabinet is working, that we are trying our best to ensure that the monies that we have gone after in terms of being able to help improve the roads as well as the bridges, that it does take time, but it also means that we have to be very systematic in how we roll out the program. And just to give the assurance that that work and that those efforts are in progress. And I hope that over the course of the next few weeks, we can come back again and announce that we've completed and knocked off the key bridges, certainly to get the works program actually started as well. Just lastly, I wanted to mention another decision that was taken by the Cabinet of Barbados. I think most of you would be aware that during COVID, we would have engaged the services of persons to assist us within the schools, to act as school monitors. Those persons assisted us at a time when certainly the teaching profession needed to be able to have the necessary support to keep our children safe. I certainly, as then minister, saw many of them not just sanitizing the children's hands, but certainly becoming that support that a number of the kids needed. They were tying shoelaces, they were assisting in many different ways, and getting very close to the kids in terms of being confidants and persons that they respected as well. We feel that despite the petering off of COVID, I don't think it's completely left us, but as a cabinet, we recognize the work that some of them have done. We also recognize that some of them during the period were inspired to go and take up courses in childcare. Many of them got very glowing reports from the principals as well, indicating that there was clearly a need for us to create a position within the Ministry of Education that would allow for the continuation of their role, even if in a different way. As a consequence, the Cabinet has agreed that those 220 monitors that were deployed across the nursery, the primary, and the special needs institutions of this country, that those persons will now transition to a position referred to as a school assistant. I believe the Ministry of Education has given them an option if they wish to continue. They're going to be at the same level as the nursery assistants. There's also provision for training to be done as well for these individuals in basic child care, because despite some having already engaged in basic child care on their own, we feel it is necessary that we create an ethos within the educational system where persons who are definitely interested will be able to support teachers within the classroom, but also generally within the school environment. And so we want them to help to continue to promote those personal but also interpersonal habits amongst our children, to assist the teachers with routine matters relating to education, We want them to help prepare the classrooms. In many cases, you have to break down classrooms and move to another class sometimes, so they will be there to assist with those types of functions. To supervise children when they arrive on mornings. There are some schools that have programs already to supervise students as they come in. But again, these monitors would have been there from very early in the morning previously, and our hope is that they can assist both with the pre-supervision but also with the after-school supervision as well. We're looking at them to also help in the construction of teaching aids in the classroom. And again, there are lots of other activities that I'm sure that perhaps may not be listed, but I know that many of them enjoy working with the children and have really taken to the role that was created for them. And we do feel that in support of the teaching profession, that this is again a necessary thing for us to do, not just for them, but also for the children of this country. And so the training has already started. And the intention is that once the school term begins, that these persons will be reintegrated into the system, but under the title now of a school assistance available to the respective schools across nursery, primary, and also the special needs institutions as well. So with that, I want to open up the floor to questions from the media.
As we open up the floor, I just ask my colleagues to use the mics provided. Identify yourself and the media house you're representing. Should be all Marie.
First question for you, Minister Humphrey. With regard to the project that you spoke about at the top of the conversation, the 24-hour shelter, can you speak to us about human resource capital? Will people be seconded from your ministry and sent to this new project, or will you actually have to hire people? And if so, how much? And what is the cost estimation for the project at this stage? And this is Barry Allen from The Nation. I'm so sorry.
I think everybody knows you, Barry. So as it stands, there's no plan to second anyone from the ministry. We're going to be working with the Alliance. We will obviously be interested in determining who gets the jobs, though. As it stands, the cost associated with it is $252,000 for the year. And that would include, and I'm talking off the cuff, but that would include one nurse, a doctor, 2 security guards, counseling sessions, I think at about $50, food, which is going to be costly, and so on. So we have it practically broken down. I think more important than that, though, is the fact that, I've already said it publicly, that we intend to be a lot more detailed, thank you, in our scrutiny of these organizations. So it is not only this entity that I've given support to. The ministry actually supports a number of organizations. We support organizations that deal with children, persons with disability, with the elderly, and that's significant numbers. And we made a determination that we were going to be involved in a lot more scrutiny and audit where necessary to make sure that the government's resources are best utilized, and also to make sure that the results, because even more important than that is to determine that what you are engaged to do, you are actually achieving, to make sure you're fit for purpose. So if you want the actual numbers that we have as of now, and for right now, we have one nurse to be coming on board for a period of 12 months, so everything here is for 12 months. And let me just say we would also assess at the end of the 12 months. So it would be continuous monitoring and an evaluation at the end to see if it works. While we also work with the other NGOs as well as strengthen the government's own capacity to be able to do it. We'll have one nurse for the time being. We're going to engage a doctor, a security officer female, a security officer male. It's also to pay utilities, meals, counseling, and a person to coordinate the entire thing, like a manager. And so we're working basically within the context of what already exists. So there's no need for us to send any of our staff, but the relationship certainly has to deepen, for sure.
And one question for Mr. Tudor, the Chief Technical Officer. I hope I'm not oversimplifying the issue with this question, but is there any possibility that the ministry could temporarily dam water courses or redirect water with regard, let's say, the Thompson Bridge? Because the rainy season, we don't think is going to suddenly change. So the rainy season will be here this year, it will be here next year. Can you temporarily redirect water courses or dam areas temporarily so you can accelerate the work to complete? any of the
well,
bridges?
As part of the whole overall plan for the Thompson Bridge, when the work is going to be started, we will have to shift the or realign a section that would allow the water to pass so that we can do our construction, right? Because we can't do the construction with the water flowing through the bridge. So we do a realignment and put in the bridge, and then more or less, kill off, for lack of a better term, the thing that we had excavated.
Katrina King from Loop News. My question is for Minister Humphrey. Earlier this year, the Alliance to End Homelessness would have spoken about their fundraising effort to purchase the building. They needed $700,000 more. Will government be contributing to this fundraising effort, given that you guys are expanding your operations?
Well, we don't have any immediate plans to contribute directly to the fund. But I do think that the work that the organization is doing deserves some support. I also feel, as I expressed in Parliament on Tuesday, that there's a large part of social responsibility associated with traditional corporate practice across the world that I would like to see more of in Barbados. In the whole scheme of things, $700,000 is not, when you look at what private sector agencies are doing, is not a whole lot of money. And I do think that if we are able to engage the private sector, because the thing is this, people tend to look at problems in silos, right? There's a homeless problem, it's the government's problem. And there's a homeless problem in town where the private sector predominantly operates, but it's a government's problem. And I don't think so. I think it's everybody's issue. I think it's an issue for families, I think it's an issue for communities, and it is certainly an issue for corporate Barbados. And so I would just use this opportunity to make a call to help support the CRI to be able to get such a building. We also have plans. We've just spent about, I think, almost $2 million to renovate the Vauxhall Senior Citizens Home. That will be reopening officially in November. We've also completely redone the Lancaster Village as well, and that should open next month. And then we're going to be fixing the Claygollett shelter. So within the context of the government, we're also making plans to do our own capital works as well.
This question is also for Minister Humphrey. In terms of graduating from the state of homelessness, I remember years ago the welfare had a welfare to work program where you wanted to, fully rehabilitate individuals so that they can help themselves, because it's a revolving door. Things happen to everyone in life. In terms now of the level of vagrancy and homelessness, has the cabinet examined the issue of maybe perhaps villages with the separate units, like how, say, you have in the housing areas, etc.? Have you explored an option like that with either urban or rural in terms of having a quick fix to some of these issues, especially in terms of like fire victims, if, landlords throw out in the dead of the night? Have you looked at that perhaps as a longer term option?
That's a lot of issues roll into one question there, Wendy. That's a very complex question, and it's a very complex issue. So directly in relation to homelessness, the issue around homelessness, yes, housing is a big part of it, but a lot of it is not a housing problem. A number of persons who are on the street have accompanying issues, mental health issues, serious drug issues, other psychiatric issues that need attending to. And sometimes to create separate facilities will not address the main problem. The other thing is, as I said earlier, I don't think the idea of continuing to build things to cater to people and separate them is the way we should be going. There are two movements that are well recognized now. One is integration. You hear us talk about it in relation to persons with disabilities and in relation to the elderly. We want to be able to integrate people and not necessarily segregate people. That's the first thing. And then the other thing is we have been very focused on this idea of caring in place where possible. So that instead of taking people out of their familiar, you work with them in situ where they are, and to be able to address their issues holistically where they are. The child protection legislation, if you look at it, a lot of it speaks actually to being able to work with families, because the ministry now has a family orientation. And on to one of your other questions, the ministry is moving from having welfare, child care board, national assistance board, and national disabilities unit to create a Department of Family Services. And in that work, we are extremely advanced. And one of the areas in there, whether we choose it as a directorate, which means it would have serious autonomy, or whether it is one of the smaller components, will be, instead of calling it welfare to work, it's now called developmental services. And the developmental service will be a kind of a cross-cutting idea, so that from the time a person comes into the system, then you're working toward reintegration, as opposed to moving in a linear fashion where you get welfare, you get the assistance, you get the grant, you get the food, you know, step to step to step, then you get training, then you get a job. You know, we realize that doesn't work. So it has to be a much more holistic approach. So across the different areas, whether it is persons who come in just because they're going through transient poverty, like they're passing through poverty, if it is a person with a disability, or if it is a person who's homeless and rehabilitated. Because I feel sometimes that we romanticize this issue of homelessness. And people see stories in the paper and say, oh, well, you don't give them a house. And if you give that person a house, I guarantee that person is not staying in that house, because there are psychological, psychiatric issues associated with it too. So there's a need for counseling. That is why the paper that we brought to Cabinet, which speaks to the overarching kind of holistic approach of training and counseling, is going to be critical. And then in relation to welfare, we've had a number of conversations about welfare, right? And how should welfare operate and how should welfare look? I recently spoke in the press and I said, in Parliament, and I said we need to look at the systems. The systems, not only in welfare, the systems in government, the systems in the private sector, the systems in Barbados, really and truly the systems in the region. We just take too long to do things. And while I know that I have, and I say so with no disrespect to my PM, but like while I know I have the best staff in Barbados, because the staff in the social services sector work extremely hard. I also know that the systems that are in place do not allow them to deliver on the things that we would want to deliver. And that is why we are now at a point where we are doing back to school, and there have been some complaints about the pace at which it is taken to get back to school assistance. And you know, we've changed the system. We have digitized, and we're now digitalizing in other parts of the ministry. We've now been in a position where you could file your application online and so on, but the bulk of Barbadians and the vast majority of applications are still paper-based, and some of them come in very late. And then if you go through the traditional steps, they come in, they have to be assessed, the person has to be contacted, the call has to be reviewed. These things take time. And so the point we were making is that we have to, and it has nothing to do with the public servants, the point that we are making is that we have to review the systems, because the systems do not allow the welfare department or any government entity to be able to deliver to the people that we have to deliver to. And at the end of the day, what's important? At the end of the day, for me, it's very important that the people who need the goods and services of the welfare department get those goods and those services, and that they get them in the shortest possible time. That is what's important. And so we have to rethink those systems. That's why we have the Pulse MIS system, which is coming into place now, which would allow us to be a lot more fast-paced. It allows welfare to talk to NAB, to talk to NDU, to talk to national assistance, to talk to child care board, to talk to NAS, when we roll it out, so that we have a comprehensive system. And if we're able to change the systems, you know, then we'll be able to address that. And then the last thing I would say as well is that there is also a lot of conversation in relation to individual isolated cases that appear in the paper, whether it's a welfare case or whether it is a case of homelessness. And while we treat to the individual and we respond oftentimes to the press because questions are asked, a lot of these things, as is indicated in your question, Wendy, are so complex that they require a whole range of interventions. And sometimes it is not in the person's best interest to have all of these issues ventilated in the public in a way that the public finds enjoyable, but that is really detrimental to the person's development. And I say that because I keep saying these reports on individuals, and then my response is normally, well, these things are complex. And so, but you know, that is the reality for most of the things. But the truth is, I would say that the ministry is working very, very hard to be able to address all these things. My staff is working extremely hard to be able to address a number of these issues as well. Thanks.
I just want to add, Wendy, in addition to what Kirk has said, while we didn't specifically address the issue of villages where we would be able to house persons who are homeless, one of the discussions today was actually regarding strengthening the community nurses through the psychiatric hospital, because again we are seeing the mental health side as also being a particular challenge in dealing with the issue of homelessness. So the issue has come up. I know Dr. Brown was present this morning, and we raised the issue with her, and I know that she's going to look into it, because we've found that a number of persons who would have been on the radar as outpatients of the psychiatric hospital, many of them were lost during COVID, and it does require now perhaps some additional resources, people going on the ground, checking back with families to see if persons have shifted from wherever they were living into the town areas, whether the relationship between the individual patient and their families has broken down, and whether there needs to be a different level of intervention. Those are the types of additional support systems that we recognize are needed. And while we're doing what we're doing in relation to the Barbados Alliance to End Homelessness, the truth is that there are all these other pieces that we're also going to have to address. The issue, and I raised this morning with them, women in the shelter with children. For me, it is a burning issue. They don't stay long, but any female with children in a shelter has to be first priority for this administration to ensure that we're able to help transition them out. So it may be a temporary solution because of the challenges we have with housing, but it cannot be the only solution, and it cannot be the long-term or even short-term solution for too long. And so we recognize, and I know the minister is trying to address another matter in terms of being able to look at some short-term housing solutions for persons generally, not just persons who are homeless, because we recognize that having the home for some persons will help them to transition. And just to say that I know that the current shelter, the Barbados Alliance to End Homelessness, they actually do provide some of the work programs. A number of the persons who are there are actually engaged in entrepreneurial activity and other business ventures. So I think the model that they're using is one that perhaps just needs to be strengthened by government and to support it, but also to encourage other private sector entities to maybe work with them more closely so we can get more people reintegrated into society and working and being productive as well. All right?
Thank you.
Prime Minister, I'll still give you closing comments. You are Minister Humphrey.
Okay. Well, again, I want to thank members of the media and those who have been listening. As I said, as Minister Humphrey said before, we try to do these press briefings to be able to bring people up to date as to what is happening. Obviously, this is a busy time in terms of cabinet, but also members are also off on vacation because this is really the only time that many of them will get a break before the work starts back in a hectic pace. But nonetheless, there are a few issues that obviously have a number of social implications for residents across the country that we felt very strongly that we needed to update on. And some of those have been hitting the headlines recently in terms of homelessness that is impacting all of us across communities, and we really did feel that it was necessary to touch that, as well as with the going back to school to be able to allow both the former school monitors who will now be school assistants to allay those fears that they will be making the transition, and certainly the concerns of the general public as to what will happen when the term begins, and also to address the pressing concerns as it relates to our bridges and bridge repair programs, but in particular to make the announcement as it relates to Borden's Bridge, and to give the commitment that while we've started with this, there's a lot of ongoing work as it relates to all of the other programs within the Scotland district that again we invite the public to just be patient, and we'll keep updating as it relates to the progress of those works as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the Acting Prime Minister and Minister of, it has escaped me, Minister of Transport, Works and Water Resources, the Honourable Satya Bradshaw, as well as the Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs, the Honourable Kirk Humphrey. We also heard from the Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Transport, Works and Water Resources, the Honourable Ramel Springer, as well as the Acting Chief Technical Officer in that ministry, Mr. Philip Tudor. I'm Lisa Lord. Thank you so much for joining us. Good afternoon.